All right, shalom, shalom. I want to give all praise and glory and honor be to the Most High God, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These are brothers from the hopeful elect. Celebrating today, our Purim, right? Happy Feast of Purim. Happy feast season to those who are keeping all the feasts, even the ones that's not mentioned in Leviticus chapter 23, right? So, like I said earlier, this is our Feast of Purim. I'm joined by the brother Denal, and we're just going to give a little quick history lesson about Purim while we celebrate and, get back to the festivities. But again, if you're tuning in live, you want to say shalom. If you're tuning in, following the live, it's over and you're watching the recording on YouTube, shalom to you as well. May the Most High be with you, with all the viewers. With that being said, though, we ain't gonna waste no time. We get straight into the Bible. So, the first precept I want you to pull is the book of Esther, chapter 4, and verse 14. Right, it's the key verse right here. Esther 4 and 14. Rusty, man. Oh man, you use your visual sword, you can, bro. We gonna hear this again. I got you right here. That's the 4, and let's read verse.
The book of Esther, chapter 4, verse 14, it says, "For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed, and who knoweth whether thou art come to thy kingdom for such a time as this?"
Right. Who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? So, such a time as this, man, we get together, we celebrate the feast days, holy days, right, for this time. Even in our absence from our land, Lord has given us an opportunity to rehearse these righteous acts. So, as often as we can, that's why we gather together for such a time as this. For days where we're not in the land, for the times where we're separated from the covenant and heritage of our God, we can come back and do this thing as a people. Like it says in Zephaniah 2:1, gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O ye nation not beside. So we're just doing what the Lord commanded us by way of the prophets. We're just doing what the Lord told us to do, even in spite of our situation as a nation, right? So we got Ezra 4:14. Let's get the book of I guess we can start at Esther 3 and 7. Let's get Esther chapter 3 and verse number 7, right?
This is the book of Esther, chapter 3 and verse number 7. It says, "In the first month that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pure, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month of Adar."
Right. So in this verse, we just read the origin of Purim, right? It says they cast pure, right? And that is lot. So they cast lots, right? To understand what Purim is, we have to understand the book of Esther, the origin, right? The events that take place in the Persian Empire during the reign of King Ahasuerus, who is identified with Xerxes the First. That's about 486 to 465 BC, right? So, man, our people was living in captivity through about give or take anywhere from, I think it was 127 provinces across the continent of Europe and Asia, just a smidgen, right? Maybe it was from that Asian part of the continent all the way to the African part of the continent, but our people were scattered during this time. So the key figures in this storyline is Mordecai, Haman, right? And of course, Esther herself. And there's a reason why all of this took place. So let's go down to the book of Esther. We already read Esther 4 and 14. Read it one more time. 4 and 14. 4 and 14, one more time.
Book of Esther, chapter 4 and verse number 14. "For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art to come to the kingdom for such a time as this?"
Right, and Esther agrees. So calling for a fast and famously declares, if she perish, she perish, right? Now, let's get into a little bit about the reversal and deliverance, right? Because again, the Lord even told us in Deuteronomy 30 that if we call our mind to follow him and we keep his covenants, he's going to reverse our curses and turn them on our enemies, right? Those who oppose us, right? So in this notes, it's called providential coincidences. And it's kind of like when the Most High hand, and it's unseen when his hand kind of begins to turn the table. So the king's favor was one of the key things that when you read the story in the book of Esther, you kind of see how like Esther had favor, and she approaches the king. He welcomed her, he offered her up, to have his kingdom, right? And she had a banquet. She invited the king and Haman to the banquet, and then to another banquet, right? So then the king himself, I'm just going over the notes I got, had a kind of like a sleepless night. The Most High caused the king to suffer from what many people like to call insomnia, right? That's what the notes kind of allude to. And he asked for the royal chronicles to be read to him, and he hears the account of how Mordecai had once uncovered an assassination plot to save his life. So the king discovers Mordecai was never rewarded. Now, Haman is going to be humiliated at some point. So let's go to the book of Esther, chapter 9, and let's go to verse number 24 to 26. Esther 9, because what we're doing is going over a little bit of how we got favor and how we were delivered, right? Now let's read about the institution of Purim.
The book of Esther, chapter 9, and you said verse 26.
Starting at 24 to 26.
Starting at verse 24, it says, because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agathite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Pur, that is the lot, to consume them and to destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Verse 26, wherefore they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur.
Right. They named the festival Purim, right? And it's really just because of the scheme of Haman, it kind of fell through, the lot he cast to destroy them became the namesake for their deliverance. So that's why we named this feast. That's why the feast was named Purim. And then Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews, kind of establishing this as actual, annual observance, like a memorial to an extent. Read verses 27 to 28.
Verse 27. The Jews ordained and took upon them and upon their seed and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writings and according to their appointed time every year. In verse 28, and that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed.
Right, man. Purim is really kept after the destruction of Nicanor. You have Nicanor, and then the next 2 days that follow is known as Mordecai's Day, or what we know as Purim, right? And these things happen because it's really all the same. The Lord gives us an opportunity to overcome our enemies. The Lord gives us an opportunity to exemplify and glorify his name. So when we do that, historically, when we did that, the Lord had these men and these leaders, including Esther and Mordecai, to declare days to remember the things that the Lord had done for us. That's why even outside of Leviticus 23, we keep days like Purim, Nicanor, Day of Simon, the Feast of Dedication, because all of these are events that the Lord gave us an opportunity to further glorify his name, even when we were in captivity, right? Even when we weren't in the land of Israel, the land that flowed with milk and honey, like he promised to our forefathers. He gave us an opportunity to see him work on our behalf. We got to reveal his name to us. So that's why we celebrate the Feast of Purim, right? I wanted to get another scripture. I'm trying to skim through. Real quick, go back up to Esther chapter 9 and verse 22. Let's read that.
Esther 9, verse 22, it says, as the days were in where the Jews rested from their enemies, and a month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy and of sending portions one to another and gifts to the poor.
Right. So that's why, a lot of people in the world celebrate Christmas, but really when you in the knowledge of God, you'll read about the Feast of Purim and you'll celebrate Purim because that's a day that you can exchange gift and pleasantries one with another, right? I know that a lot of people may not understand the history and origin, but that's why we get on live. That's why we keep the commandments the way we do, is because we try to get our people to follow the laws of God, right? And we got to try to get our people to understand that even during the Israelites' time in history, when they were separated from their land, they still strove their best to follow the laws of God. So as did our forefathers in the righteous works, so should we. Can't mimic everything everybody done in history, but the righteous ones who strove to keep the commandments to the best of their abilities in spirit and in truth, who made memorials and dedications unto the Lord during our time of captivity, is what we should strive to remember and commemorate, right? So that's just a little synopsis about the Feast of Purim. Those are just a few scriptures to touch on, exactly how, what the situation was, touching a little bit on the history, why the Lord delivered us, how he delivered us, right? You got something to add? Go ahead.
I just want to make emphasis too that how it's celebrated is, of course, we know about giving portions one to another, which we see modern days as gifts, right? And this is one of our cheap holidays where we do give gifts to each other. But at the end of it all, it says, and gifts to the poor as well, right? And so one thing we got to realize, like it says in Luke, it says, paraphrasing, if you got 2 shirts, give to somebody that doesn't have none, right? For now, you can at least have one and they can have one, right? So always be in that mind frame when you come into this season of Purim, that it's not just about giving gifts to each other. A lot of people like to get in their head, man. You're like, we're giving gifts to each other. I'm only going to give to people I know that's in the truth. You know what I'm saying? And it's bigger than that. It's really given to the lost sheep in the truth or out of the truth, right? But also focusing on the ones that are poor and in poverty, right? Take some time out of your week during your season of Purim to give back to the less fortunate, man, because that's also within the ordinance of keeping this feast, right? Don't just give to each other, give to those that are less fortunate as well, right? And I think that's amazing too. That in the world they got soup kitchens and all that stuff, right? But when you see holidays in the world, you don't really see any holidays that are associated with giving to the poor, right? How good is it that we have a holiday that we observe in our Rolodex that allows us to give to the poor? You think about Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that stuff, there's really no emphasis on giving to the poor. You know what I'm saying? But this is actually in our ordinance to do so. So make sure you do it when you come around this time of the year, right?
And I got give me the book of Ecclesiastes, book of Sirach, chapter 4, starting at verse number 4, real quick. Because you read that. Matter of fact,
4.
Start at verse 1. Start at 4 and 1. We're gonna read through 5.
The book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, starting at verse number 1, it says, "My son, defraud not the poor of his living, and make not the needy eyes to wait long. Make not a hungry soul sorrowful, neither provoke a man in his distress. Add not more trouble to an heart that is vexed, and defer not to give to him that is in need. Reject not the supplication of the afflicted, neither turn away thy face from a poor man. Turn not away thine eyes from the needy, and give him none occasion to curse thee."
Right, verse 6.
"For if he curse thee in the bitterness of his soul, his prayer shall be heard of him that made him."
All right, so pretty much, wisdom given in Sirach tells us not to even give the poor any reason to supplicate to the Lord on their behalf about things that we did to offend them, because they're already vexed. The poor already has less than the average person in this life. So when you see an opportunity to give, man, as you freely receive, give. I'm always saying, I'm of the mindset of like the Lord to give it back to us. You can ask my wife. I always make that quote because when you give, man, you got to give with a cheerful heart, not looking for it in return. And you got to do those things because, again, it's really commanded of us. Even in the law, when we had land, we were supposed to leave a section of our land if we had a garden to allow the poor to get groceries out your garden. You know what I'm saying? Pretty much, roughly paraphrasing. But that just goes to show how much the Lord emphasizes, helping out the poor and needy, right? Helping out the lowly in heart. Because at the end of the day, like the brother alluded to, gathering is not just about how we take care of each other, but it's about how we take those that may not have as much value to you, right? So that's just a little bit about the Feast of Purim. Most High willing, you all will be edified in this lesson, this short little lesson and clip. But yeah, we want to say shalom to those who tune in. Again, happy feast season to everybody that's been feasting during these times. We hope your feast is enjoyable, as ours is and will be moving forward. So we want to say shalom, all praise, glory, and honor to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right. Shalom.
Ashar Purim.